Call this afternoon's joint City of Sioux Falls Council and Minnehaha County Commission meeting together, and we'll have the roll call from the city side.
Councilors Anderson.
Here.
Benega.
Here.
Brown.
Here.
Costello.
Here.
Jameson.
Here.
Knutson.
Here.
Litz.
Here.
Staggers.
Present.
Quorum present.
I'd like to call the Minnehaha County Commission to order.
Okay, let's have the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, first item.
Approval of the regular agenda.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the regular agenda?
So moved, Brown.
Is there a second?
Second, Benninger.
Benega, all in favor, vote yes. Those opposed, no.
Councilors Staggers.
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
Benega.
Yes.
Brown.
Yes.
Costello.
Yes.
Jameson.
Yes.
Knutson.
Yes.
Litz.
Yes.
Same motion for the county.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes unanimously.
Okay, let's go to hearings resolution, item number 1.
A resolution approving the vacation of that portion of South Overland Pass beginning 33 feet north of the platted center line, intersection of Dan Ridge and South Overland Pass, line adjacent to lots 20 and 22A, Block 5, Split Rock Heights, second edition, and lots 15 through 19, and Lot 21, Block 2, Split Rock Heights, third edition, and ending 100 feet south of the north property line of Lot 21, Block 2, Split Rock Heights, third edition, and extending 66 feet west to a point abutting Lot 22A, Block 5, Split Rock Heights, second edition, all in Section 19-T101 North R50W, Minnehaha County.
Good evening. Pat Herman for County Planning, and I will be presenting on behalf of Public Works for the city also. This is a request to vacate a portion of Overland Pass, which is in the Split Rock Heights neighborhood. And some of you may remember we had a pretty similar request last year about this time. This portion of Overland Pass was platted in 1977 as a roadway, but it's never been constructed. And the part that would be vacated is shown in the screen in the red hashing. It would extend from Dan Ridge north across Schaefer Pond and then continue towards Split Rock Road. It would stop short of where the pavement currently exists on the north side of the pond. And I understand that many of you had a chance to get out there and look at the area yourselves. I met with the petitioners on June 8, 2009, and then also with the opposition on July 2, 2009. Both sides are present tonight, so I will let them present their cases to you. Commissioner Tweed had asked that we focus on the legal concerns that were raised at the last meeting and have some answers there, so I will quickly go through some of those concerns. One of the concerns was what the property owners actually own. When this area was platted, the lots were extended out into the pond till they hit up with the right-of-way there. And what this does is the ownership, these landowners own the floor of the pond. They don't own the water, but they do own the floor, so if the pond were to disappear, they would own the ground just like any regular platted lot. The water itself in the pond is classified as waters of the state, so that's owned by the public. If you were to vacate this right-of-way, there would no longer be access to the pond. All the land around this pond will be under private ownership. However, state law does not require that there be public access to waters of the state. The dam itself sits on private property there. The owners, which are the Hillies, have to maintain and that dam to the state standards. They also have the right to drain the pond if they would like to do so. It's up to them to keep the water into this pond. One of the issues that was raised in this community and at the last meeting was the issue of the water pump and its lines for electrical and water that run down the right-of-way. That pump is owned by Mr. Bills. His property itself does not touch on the pond, and it is located on, should say in your staff report, the west side of Overland Pass. And if I can point it out, right here, got that one, yep. Just so that's pointed out to where that is. There were, both sides had given me information on the issue of the pump, so I decided to go right to the source. I called the Executive Director of the State Electrical Commission, J.J. Lynn, to talk about the electrical lines that were run to the pump. This was done back in 1989, so they no longer have any permits on record. They only keep permits for 5 years at the commission. But when they asked, Mr. Bills did provide them information on who the electrician was that had done the work and the inspection fees that were paid at that time. They did do, the electrical commission had their inspector out, they inspected the electrical lines, and they didn't find anything at this time that was in violation of their ordinance. I also spoke to Eric Bronland, he's with DENR, on the issue of water rights. There is only one water right that's been issued in that area, and that's for the pond, the right to have the pond, the standing water there. That was issued to the first developers in the area, the Har Brothers, in 1977. And then when Robert Hilly bought the land that included the dam, he then got the water right. Mr. Bills himself does not have a water right, but he is using water under the domestic use of water regulations. And as long as you don't exceed the gallons per day or pump the gallons that can be pumped per minute, you can use water for non-commercial purposes for your lawn, your garden, your trees. The only issue that was raised by Eric Gronland was that at one time Mr. Bills was watering over 1 acre with that water. They spoke with him and he agreed that he would cut back from the 3 acres to only watering the 1 acre in size. So currently this pump system is running down the right-of-way. So if you were to vacate the right-of-way, it would split down the middle, 33 feet, going to the property owners on each side. And then at that point, it would become a civil matter over whether the pump lines could remain, and that would be between the landowner and Mr. Bills himself. When the Public Works Department and Minnehaha County reviewed this issue and what to do with the vacation, we didn't take into consideration the pump at all in looking at how to make this recommendation. We looked at land use, transportation, and public utility access in this area. And one of the things that we considered were the fact that the dam is located on private property, so that's out of the control of any public entity, that the trees have been planted in the right-of-way south of the pond there, so that it somewhat indicates that the neighborhood does not feel that that they need drivable access to the pond at this point. We also looked at the fact that the construction of the road is highly unlikely, given the fact that we have the pond there, and it's been platted since '77, and there's never been a request for a road construction there. We also looked at the fact that there's no existing utility easements running through this right-of-way, and that all the properties that abut the right-of-way have access at another point. We would not be cutting off anybody's access here. So looking at all those points, the Public Works Department and County Planning are recommending that this street be vacated. I know there's some confusion because we do vacations a little different than you do in the city. Under state law, it gives the county commissioners the right to vacate this right-of-way if they feel the public interest is served with the vacation, and then you as the city council would have to vote in the affirmative along with them to make the vacation valid. So tonight you need to take a vote on whether to approve or deny the vacation of this portion of South Overland Pass, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Ms. Herman, I spent a considerable amount of time out there about 10 days ago, like my colleagues. And I guess a question I have is, so again, 21 years ago or whenever this pumping started, so was there some permission given by someone then to Mr. Bills to have a line under an easement?
I'd probably let Mr. Bills discuss that. I don't have any written documentation that anything was given to him to run that. The right-of-way itself, there's no public entity that claims that, so we don't have any written documentation from any government that there was the right to run those lines.
Thank you.
Any questions? Carol?
A lot here to digest, but if I understand correctly, Mr. Bill's all of his connections to this water from where he lives over to the water is under that road or alongside that road.
Right.
Okay, so if this road is vacated, who does that land belong to? I know you said it.
It'll split down the middle, and each adjacent property owner
Okay.
will gain the 33-foot wide strip.
So this is a huge problem for Mr. Bill.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, I have a number of questions. First of all, in regard to the map, I've seen so many different maps on this, and they seem to be a little bit different. So I guess if you could just clarify to start off with.
Okay.
Okay, the area that's going to be vacated south of the lake,
Right.
counting, there seems to be 4 property owners that would get land from this vacation.
correct,
Is that
yes.
right? Okay. But also on one map, I've seen this no man's land. And I'm just wondering why this isn't reflected on this map.
Yeah, that was done by a surveyor, but it's not been filed with the Register of Deeds. So as far as our legal lines are, we have to stay with what we show as being platted. And that's coming from the plats at the Register of Deeds.
Okay. Also, too, in regard to the stream that flows, that the water that enables the lake to exist, I was under an understanding that where the natural stream would flow, that would not belong to anybody. That would be public. Is that correct?
Well, it's waters of the state, but there's a platted easement, I think it's 33 foot wide, that follows that creek, so that it can't ever be blocked. It's for that creek to continue to flow.
Okay, so it's an easement, and the property
Right.
owners have granted that easement, or how does
That was the
work?
developers, right, way
Oh.
back when they platted this entire development. They put that on the deed.
Okay. And then also, too, if my understanding is correct, last year when we dealt with this issue, at least the city engineer was against this, granting this easement. Now here we are a year later, and the city engineer plus yourself are in favor of this. Why do we have the change taking place in thinking?
I would let your Public Works Director answer that.
Okay.
Okay, Mark.
Appropriate.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, and County Commissioners. Mark Cotter with the Office of Public Works. Just to address that, there's a number of items that would be addressed as an area like this were to be annexed into the city if and when that happens in the future. And so we have no objection just in taking another look at this based on the maturity of the trees, in some cases, the steepness of access down into this area. Just immediately south of 26th Street, there's been a large regional BMP developed. That water routes from the south to the north. Also, as you look at that map, that water routes from the west to the east. Just like any time you bring an area into the city and it begins to mature, and again, we expect that this was going to be down the road at some point, but reasonable access to sanitary sewer, to drainage facilities could be gained at that time and serve more of a dual purpose.
I guess I'm still not quite sure. I understand the real reasoning. You mentioned the trees, you mentioned the steepness. Well, that was also true last year. And I guess I'm still, and then as far as sanitary sewer, I mean, it would seem to me that it would be best to keep this in case we want to use sanitary sewer. Because it is a gully, and that's the best place to put sanitary sewer. So it would seem to me we would not have changed our mind.
Well, we look at it from a standpoint of first roadway purposes.
Mm-hmm.
With there being a pond there likely will not be a road through that to serve the greater good of the public. So then the next step is what other use might it be used for? And with there continuing to be other items that will be addressed during an annexation process, which includes all the elements of a municipality from streets to drainage to sewer to water. we would expect that we could address those at that point. And again, we have no objection to this street vacation.
And then lastly, the last paragraph in the report from the Minnehaha County Planning and Zoning Memorandum, it says the following. SDCL 31-3-6 grants power to the county commissioners to vacate any right-of-way located or to be used within the county if the public interest will be better served by the proposed vacation. And I'm trying to understand how the public is going to be better served by this vacation, because now the public will not have access to this land. It's going to make it worse for the public instead of better. So are we violating SDCL 31-3-6?
I would probably have the county respond to that since they use the 31.
Okay.
Okay.
Mark? Yes. Question. I don't know whether which you were Pat, but the street has been platted, the right-of-way's been platted, but never accepted. What exactly does that mean?
It means that no government entity, the county, the township, the state, or the city has accepted that road under their provision, so there's no maintenance on the road, there's no upkeep, nothing. Nobody actually controls what goes on in that right-of-way.
But it's still platted right-of-way.
It's still a platted right-of-way, and on the plat, it was dedicated for public use. Your question?
Yes, about the
Yes.
public interest will be
Public
better
interest.
served.
That is, that's the commission's job to determine whether they feel public interest is served by closing this right-of-way or not. At this point, it's 66 feet of access to the pond. Whether it's needed or not in the community, I think we need to hear from both of the sides on how they feel about that.
But I guess you must have determined that it was in the public interest to make a recommendation to vacate.
From a land use point, we've determined that it does not serve a purpose. Given that, it's been blocked by the trees, so the road, the fact that a road is probably not going to be built is one of the main reasons we chose to recommend a vacation. The other thing is it serves no purpose. It doesn't provide access to property for anybody. Everybody has access that they get to their property other ways.
But it provides
Right.
for public to be able
It
to
does
get
provide
onto the
to
lake.
public to the lake.
Yes.
That's the only
Yeah.
thing that it provides.
Because this is the only access for public.
Correct.
Can you explain a little bit more on the dam? The dam's on private property.
Right.
So a private individual has to pay and maintain that dam.
Correct.
And if they were not to do that, it would have to be removed and there would be no pond at all.
Right. The state would step in and insist that they keep the dam up to standards of the state. If they don't do that, they would face prosecution from the state. So then they could choose then to get rid of the dam and have the pond drain, and it'd just be land there and no water, no standing water.
And then if it were to revert back to just being a creek, with the BMPs that have been built upstream, I guess it would be, is there likely there would ever be enough water for Mr. Bills to have any use, or could he even get access then? Because then it would be a 33.
You could access it. I don't think there would be enough flowing water for his purposes on his property. My guess is, and I don't want to speak for him, he would probably sink a well to do that, I would assume. But
That dam has evidently been there since 1976 or 1977. Have the state's design standards changed on that, or is the age of the dam getting to the point? And I think this was a source of contention last time we were here, was the age of that dam.
that I don't know. I don't have an answer for you on that, and it's possible the property owner may have, I know they've done some work on it in the not too distant past, so they may have some dates for you on,
Very good.
on
Thank you.
that.
From the city's point of view, I'm looking at the petition here. Are all the property owners in agreement with this vacation?
No, there is one property owner that does have land on the right-of-way, and that would be right here, right when you come off of East 26th Street. He would be right on the east side, and he does front on Overland Pass, and he is not in favor of the vacation, and he is here tonight to speak to you on that.
Would that be something we'd want to,
Well, we'll offer anyone that wants to come and-
Later?
and
Okay.
comment to come forward after we finish with Pat. And so, Mr. Mayor? Go ahead, Jeff.
My question, I guess, is procedurally, does the county make a decision first? Is that what our plan will be?
Right. The county would make the decision first because this is really not in the city right now, Pat.
And you may not be able to answer this, but it seems to be some discrepancy to how much water is actually coming out of the pond. On one hand, we hear that it's, less than the
Right.
amount that's allowed, and on the other hand, it's more. I mean, is there any third party that can determine, is there any meter that's ever been on the pump?
No, I don't think there's a meter out there. All I have to go by is Eric Ronlin with the DENR. When he told me that they had contacted Mr. Bills, they felt he was pulling more water, that he was covering 3 acres instead of the allowed 1 acre in size. And during their conversation, Mr. Bills agreed to pull back his watering to 1 size, and that's all the information they had from
There's no-
from DENR.
There's no verification or...
No, all I have is what he spoke to me about.
I guess the other thing I have a question about, Pat, is even if there's no government entity that's ever accepted, quote, the right-of-way, the public right-of-way, the county and the city still have legal responsibility and liability for anything that would happen on that piece of property?
I would turn that over to the attorneys, but I would say probably not.
I'm sure we'll get to that.
The answer is no from the state's attorney.
Further questions? Not, are there others that wish to address the joint council and commission on item number 1?
Good evening, council members. My name is Sean Nichols. I represent the petitioners in this matter, and on their behalf, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to address you. Obviously, this is something that I know a lot of you have put a lot of effort in, come out and looked at, and studied this very carefully, and my clients very much appreciate that. And to address, I think, one of Commissioner Stagger's questions about what's different this time around than it was last year, I think the level of awareness, what we've looked at, what we know, there's a lot of questions that you have that simply, I think, went unanswered and not looked at as carefully last time around. And to start with, I'd want to point out a couple of things. First, there are covenants that apply to this particular property. And to kind of give you some history, it appears that this was first platted and covenants applied to the property in April of 1977 by Leonard Schaefer and Lorna Schaefer, the developers, and it was just a pond at that point in time, and there was an easement, which I'll talk about here in a second, but that same year was when a subsequent developer actually acquired this land and appears sought a permit and actually stocked it with a dam. And so since that point in time, we've had 32 years where we've had a 27-acre pond that's been existing over this right-of-way, and it hasn't changed. The water's there, and so that's what you see, and really the need for a road at this point in time does not exist. But I would like, if I could, just look at the covenants for a second, and it provides for an easement. This is the 1977 covenants. The easement was around the creek, or the little pond that's now completely filled with water, several acres. The easement wasn't for the public, it was for the landowners. The developer prepared the easement for the people who would live there to control this and use it as they saw fit. And so to address this easement issue, which I know was a subject of contention last time around and perhaps some misunderstanding, the easement is for the people that live there. And the petitioners are the only ones that abut the river. The people that oppose this are not on this greenway at all. And so that easement is for the benefit of those who want to see this vacated. So that is the first thing I would note about the easement, which I would like to address. The second thing is in 1989, the covenants again were changed. Those covenants provided for a homeowners association to control the pond. And as part of the homeowners association responsibility, they had some concerns about pumping and control. And for whatever reason, we've gone 20 years, and the homeowners association, as I can tell, has never existed. But the developer contemplated that there would be a homeowners association to control this pond. And I suspect they had no idea to address another one of your questions, Commissioner Staggers, that there was public access here. I think it was always assumed, for the most part, that this was private land. The plat actually extends under the basin of the pond, as you see, and so the access point was something I don't think anyone ever knew of. And in fact, I'd like to show you a picture of what the access point looks like right now. It's 66 feet. It's the only access point to this lake that's available to the public, and you can't get there. No one maintains this access point. Anyone who uses this for recreation does so by asking a landowner with permission, because 99.9% of this land is owned by the landowners. You can't realistically get to the pond for hunting and recreation and whatever you want to use the pond for. So the thought of the public wanting to use this just seems to me to be nonsensical. And in fact, I can tell you from personal experience that I grew up in the neighborhood and I fished there as a small child, and I always did so with permission of Dick Haar and John Haar, who are the individuals that, the subsequent developers here, that created these covenants for the association. And so I can tell you that the public use of this really is restricted to the pumping. There isn't anyone accessing this marsh. You can't get to the lake. There's, as you can see in the summer, it's kind of algae that forms on the surface, and you probably couldn't launch a canoe even if you could get to the water's edge. This right away has the trees and the shrubs, and as you can see by the PowerPoint that we attached to the agenda as well, it makes clear that there is no access. So that's just something I wanted to point out. Now, the biggest concern we have going forward is the ability to preserve the pond. The people that I represent have formed a homeowners association now, and I didn't know until today actually that the covenants provided for that, but they formed a homeowners association. Their concern going forward is, well, we have this 27 acres of water. What are we going to do with it? Are we going to drain it and leave the little creek there? Are we going to keep this pond here? And what do we do? Well, the Hillies have spent $4,500 maintaining this dam because they actually hold the permit for it. But as you can see, when the water levels fluctuate, and by the way, with the construction that's going on upstream, we have silt that's being deposited in here, and so the water level is filling in, and it's kind of full of muck. And so the question is, well, are we going to spend money to preserve this and dredge it and do what we need to do to keep this pond looking beautiful, or are we just going to let it fill in and drain it? Well, if you want to spend the money to preserve it and have it look nice, well, you want to be able to make sure that you have some control over what's going to happen if you do spend the money. And so that's part of how we get here in the petition this time around, and really the people that I represent, their concern going forward is, if we're not going to have any control over this 66 feet that no one uses anyway, we're not just going to let this pond deteriorate. So that's one of the issues that I wanted to address and make clear today. And lastly, I'll just talk about the pumping a little bit. If you could go to the PowerPoint. There's another picture of the access point. In fact, we have the pump that's smack dab in the middle of the access point. And so, if someone 2 miles away actually knew about this public access point, they'd, of course, have that pump to contend with to even get to the water. They could get there. Now, there is, in one of these pictures you can see there's some fencing around the access point. I wanted to touch on that a little bit. That's to keep rodents from the pond and getting up into some of the land there. It's not to restrict public access. As I understand it, there's beavers and things like that down there, and some of the homeowners are looking to try and reduce some of the injury that way. Now, there was also suggestion in some of the materials submitted by those in opposition that there's been some trespassing signs, and that we got kind of a Hatfield and McCoy situation developing here where these property owners are trying to ward people off. Well, as I understand it, last year the commission had suggested that there might be liability concerns to the private landowners if people are trespassing on their land and accessing the pond. And so those signs were put up in a response to that. It's not to try and start a war here by any means. I want to turn back to this pump for a second. What we have, and Commissioner Costello, you had asked the question, where are we getting these statistics from as to how much water is being removed from the pond? Well, we don't know, and that is another source of concern for the landowners, the petitioners moving forward, is what state statute provides, is that you can pump up to 18 gallons per second for residential use, limited to an acre. Well, we have 3.5 acres, and so all we have to regulate that is someone's word, who's stuck this pump in the private right-of-way here. And so that is a real concern of ours going forward as well. Obviously, the state water belongs to the state, but how do we control that? And how do we know? And what's an electric pump doing in a public land anyway? Last thing I wanted to just point out. Look at this going forward. You can see from the aerial view all of the trees that are in this right-of-way. They're mature trees. They're several feet tall. You'd have to cut those down to put a road in at this point in time. And I mean, the idea that this might eventually serve the public, even though it hasn't done so for the last 32 years, just isn't realistic. That there is no need for the public to have this land. So we get back to your statute and how do you balance the equities on something like this, as you always must do. And from our perspective, there really is no one from the public that has a manifest need to use this right-of-way other than for the pumping. And that isn't, in my view, and I hope and respectfully submit, in your view as well, it should be a conclusion that no public really is served. We have just one other private landowner with an interest in this, and the public doesn't even know about this. So those are kind of some things that I wanted to add to the discussion tonight on behalf of my clients. I'd be happy to take any questions that any of you might have with what I've raised here tonight, or with what the staff report has raised as well.
Questions?
Yes. Sean, you mentioned the homeowners association. Is there actually a homeowners association right now? Because my understanding is that they were still in the process of wanting to get a homeowners association.
Well, I'll speak to the lawyer. No, I am the lawyer. I formed it last week. I don't know if Pierre has issued a shingle yet. I didn't receive it in the mail, but we sent in our articles last week to form that. And actually, I have a copy of... Just go to these are the 89 covenants, and they specifically call for a homeowners association here. For whatever reason, that was never incorporated, but it was always the plan, and it applies to everyone's property out there, not just those that abut the land. And our homeowners association is not intended to be exclusive. Anyone who wants to join and weigh in on any issues, they're welcome to do so by our articles. And in fact, the way the covenants read is anyone who lives out in this split rock development don't have to be abutting the water to be a part of the association. You just have to have an interest out there.
So this homeowners association, when you get the paperwork back from Pierre, in effect, though, will not have any authority over this vacation or anything. Is that correct?
That's very true. One of the things that we want to do, though, is figure out how we preserve the pond, get organized to do that, who's going to pay for it. Like I said, the Hillies actually maintain the permit at this point in time, but others benefit from that as well. And so, I mean, there's questions about how do we share this resource with those that live nearby and make it equitable to everybody. So.
And also, too, the covenants that you mentioned, I mean, they don't even apply to what we're talking about tonight. Is that correct?
No, they do. The easement that you had asked about, I mean, to the extent that that's some important issue from your standpoint of this public easement, it doesn't exist. It was an easement that was made for the benefit of these landowners. And I think it also is telling of the limited recognition that there was even public access to this pond, that two developers went through the trouble to prepare covenants that apply to a pond and the preservation of the pond without any recognition that, well, this is public water. Or the public have the right to access this, and they can bring their boat in and do whatever. So I think that they do apply to this pond and how it's used.
Well, yeah, they apply, but, in certain areas, these covenants do not apply on this area we want to, which is, an attempt here to, vacate this. I mean, covenants don't apply to that at all.
Well, to the extent that the right-of-way goes right through 27 acres of water, it would apply. Because we have...
Well, no, if these covenants applied, you don't even have to be here before us, because you could go to a court of law and they would uphold the covenants. But I don't see how these covenants have anything at all to do with us vacating this. Now,
and that might,
this land, yeah.
And that might be where we just disagree a little bit. But I think if you go back to the intent of the developer and look to say, hey, we went through the trouble to prepare 2 sets of covenants that talk about this pond and controlling it. Why do that unless they had no idea that the public had the right-of-way on this? And I think that confirms the point that I'm trying to make, is that there is no public access that anyone knew about or is using. It will be, when you get back to balancing the equities, injured by a decision to vacate this right-of-way.
But there is a recognition that this is not private property because you're coming before us to vacate. And also, you have the no trespassing signs. I mean, I saw the no trespassing signs, and it was in the area where this right-of-way is at. Presumably, people might be walking down the right-of-way. Oh, no trespassing. Don't go across in this area. I mean, there's a recognition. This is a right-of-way.
Well, obviously, that's how we get to this point. I'm talking about going back, and when you cited the statute that you need to apply to balance the equities. Okay, is there a public that will be aggrieved by a decision to vacate this? And you'll get to hear from whatever public they may be, but I'm telling you that based on these covenants, that's a pretty good indication that no one really knew about that. And again, the no trespass sign was put up, as I understand it, at the directive of the last meeting, that, hey, if you're a private owner and people are accessing your land to get to this pond, you might have some liability there. So do what you can to take some reasonable steps to minimize your liability, which is another good reason for forming an association to control this land. Okay, if people are using it, which they do for fishing or whatever, let's have some rules. Let's have some liability insurance. Let's make sure that our friends and family and whoever is accessing this pond are safe and doing it in an orderly fashion.
And just one final comment.
Sure.
The bills are not breaking any law, statute, anything. Is that correct?
To my knowledge, we don't know. I mean, if you look at, can you go to slide 4, please?
I mean, we do have the state of South Dakota saying it's okay for them to do this.
No, we don't. What we have is a statute that says you cannot use an industrial pump to irrigate more than an acre of land at more than 18 gallons per second. Maybe it's 5, I'm sorry. This is a letter from the state last year saying, well, we think you're breaking the statute. And so what we have at this point in time is Mr. Bill's word that he is not violating the statute. I don't know if the state wants to get into this mess very bad.
No, you said that, I mentioned that the state has said this is okay. Now, the reason I'm saying that is because they're not taking action against him. And I think that's a good presumption to make, that he's not breaking the law because they're not taking any action against him.
I would say that anyone who comes...
if he was breaking the law or whatever, that action would be taken against him. And you would also be invoking the state to be here tonight to talk about this.
I would say both from a state standpoint and from a private landowner standpoint, litigation is probably the worst alternative that they could possibly select to try and fix something like this. And so I think it would be presumptuous for me to think that the state does not feel that way. And I suspect potentially they do, but...
Why isn't the state here today?
It's Ann's turn.
I mean, why isn't the state here today?
Ann's turn.
I didn't get the question answered at all.
You've got enough. It's your turn.
I have a question, and I want to follow up on a little thing you said, and I kind of went by, and I want to come back to it. I think you said that by vacating this, it will not take away the public access to the pond. Did I hear you say that?
No, if I misspoke if I said that. Certainly through the landowners, you can have access with permission.
Okay.
But that's not any different than the set of circumstances we're dealing with today. Because that right-of-way is inaccessible, those that are using it for recreation are using it with permission from a landowner.
Okay, thank you. I wanted that clarification.
Hey, Carol?
You gave us really good information that I hadn't heard before that helps me define what that piece of property is. And that is from those covenants. Would you go back to that again, where really the owner's intent was for this just to be it was never intended to be a road, it was never intended to be used by the public. You know which piece I'm talking about? So that we need to look at this a little differently than maybe we've looked at it before because of the language in this. Am I correct or incorrect?
As I understand it, the county's never done anything with this road. There's never been any intent to do anything. And frankly, I don't know if anyone knew that it existed up until very recently when you start asking questions and finding out what's all involved here. But the 77 covenants that I discussed earlier show, first of all, that the greenway easement reserved for the property owners, which to me is the first clue when we're looking at this, that the first developer really had no idea that there was some roadway that went across.
But that is this property, correct? I mean, that is what we're talking about. Overland Pass is this greenway easement.
No. That's a different easement. I apologize. There is an easement that runs east-west, which is the natural flow of the drainage. That's what's been dammed up to create what is Schaefer's Pond. Then we have the Overland Pass, which is the road running north-south.
So there'll be public access maintained through the 33-foot easement that the creek comes in at?
No. And the point being is that was never a public easement to show that. As I understand it, last year there was some suggestion, well, what difference does vacating the road make because we have this easement that runs on the east-west flow on the creek bed, which is now long submerged. And the point being with that is that the landowners, to the extent that I think it's a red herring to look at that easement to say, well, that's an issue that shows that there's some public right-of-way here. What I'm getting at is that from the get-go, the developer of this land had always felt that that easement would be for the benefit of the landowners that abut that particular easement, the east-west easement. So.
I have a question for the state's attorney whenever there's time.
Okay, Kermit, do you have another question you want to ask that follow up on? Because you were asking another one. Did you have another one?
Not at this time.
Okay. Other questions? Go ahead, Bob.
I'd like to point out that easement up there says it's for drainage, and somehow the road got thrown in here, and I'm not even sure if this East Overland Pass on the southern part is correct as far as it being a road access. It says drainage, which would cast aspersions on whether it was ever an access at all.
Again, I hope I haven't caused any confusion, and I'll do this. If you look at the natural flow of water, that's where that greenway was originally, and the covenants talked about some easement. And then what we have is this right-of-way going like that, that's never been used either. There's no discussion in the 77 covenants about that right-of-way, and they were both created in the same year, which is interesting to me. And then we go to 89. We talk about membership in the association and the landowners maintaining the pond. And so, again, those are two clues, as I see it, that this intent with the pond and with this waterway was always that it be controlled by the landowners around it and not something like Lake Alvin or some other body of water on the east side of town.
I've got a topographical map here that shows elevations from Vernon here. I borrowed it from him, but I'm looking at the swales on there, and that certainly looks to me like it's drainage the way the lay of the land is. And I think that according to that, and probably the intent of the developer, it may have been drainage, so.
That makes a lot of sense, too.
But let me ask you, from a lawyer's point of view, if this was set up as a covenant, but there was no association formed, doesn't that make all that moot anyway?
No, the covenants run with the land. I should say that there's a reason they call it practicing law, because you're always learning something new every day, and that would certainly be a question where I'd have to do some more studying. But the covenants run with the land, and since 1989, the covenants provide for the formation of a homeowners association, apply to everyone in the development. So the fact that they don't have a homeowners association doesn't necessarily mean that they've waived the right to do that. Certainly, I think, strong evidence that they could do that at any time, whether today or 20 years ago.
Okay.
Okay, you said you came up with these covenants today.
Yes.
Why haven't we heard about this before now?
Well, obviously there's a lot going on. This is a fluid situation like any question under study, and to be prepared, we checked with the Register of Deeds on Friday to see if there were any covenants that might additionally assist our point of view on this, and I was provided with the Register of Deeds provided me with the covenants this morning. So obviously we've been here for 50 minutes going through technical points of law and fact, and I could probably yak your ear off for another hour. So it's not like we were trying to play hide the ball or anything like that. This is a fluid situation, dynamic as most issues are. Probably more that we'll find out as we leave here tonight.
Further questions?
Mr. Nichols, when I visited that area about 10 days ago, I learned from one of the neighbors who opposes this vacation idea, and I know that he is here and can speak for himself, and he can speak more eloquently than I can. But my understanding was that he wanted to maintain road access to that property because he plans to build a garage for his recreational vehicle. And I was just wondering if you had any comments on that, and I guess but I suppose that if the decision is made, which it has not been made yet, but if it is made to vacate that there would still be 33 square feet for that landowner. But I just wanted to throw that into the mix since that was a concern that was shared with me.
Well, again, with the pump being right smack dab in the middle of this right-of-way, I mean, why are we building a garage on public land? If we vacate it, it sounds to me like your property owner is going to get more land, which is more land to construct the shed on. Maybe I'm misinterpreting your question, but to me it sounds like that would be a plus for this particular person as opposed to a detriment if the petition is granted.
Other questions? Pat, who did you want to?
The state's attorney.
State's attorney.
Could I ask one quick question? Sean, I think you're representing the Vences, so I'm just curious, and you may or may not know the answer to this. When they purchased their property, was it on the open market? Was it a closed sale? Was it a purchase that they did through like MLS that anybody could have bought the land, such as Mr. Bills or any other person?
You're talking about the Hillies now, the ones that maintain
Well,
the
I'm
permit?
looking at the Benzes. From the first day the Benzes purchased their property to north, they wanted us to stop pumping. So I think it was the Benzes property that I'm reading here from the July 12, 2008 comment from the Bills regarding the Benzes, and I've heard from her. So my question is, do you know whether that property was on the MLS and anybody could have purchased it?
They've been there for 17 years. I don't know if they built it or if they bought
Okay.
it. They
That's
might
all.
be one of the first people out there.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, they're on vacation.
I just wondered if it was kind of open to...
Do you want Gordy to come up? Gordy, would you come up, please?
Well, on behalf of the landowners that are present here, I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Sean.
Gordy, my question is if the county had accepted this right away at some point in time, would the pump be allowed to be put in there?
No, only if the county highway Gordy Swanson from the state's attorney's office. No, this pump would only be allowed if the county highway superintendent allowed it. The county highway superintendent has jurisdiction to grant easements for the use of county rights-of-way for utilities, either public or private, and that's done routinely. And that brings up a quick point that I'd like to clarify for all of you, Commissioner Costello and members of the County Commission. The way this plat sits, I don't believe it would have ever been approved if this were presented to zoning officials today, because at this point, we require typically that every dedicated public right-of-way have some legal entity, whether it be a city, a county, a township, or a homeowners association, that will accept responsibility for all the rights-of-way within a development. That's, of course, as some of you familiar with development may recognize, to ensure that people don't just attempt to dump rights-of-way onto county or township responsibility. And that ties in with the question from this side, and the answer is no. There is no city, county, or township liability for anything that happens on this right-of-way because nobody has accepted it. It only exists because it was platted before the time of modern zoning, when you couldn't just file a plat, leaving this right-of-way in such a nebulous position.
Yeah, so, Gordy, at the time this was all done, what is the formal process for the county to have accepted this? Would they have had to pass a resolution or whatever?
Yes, the county would have had to formally resolve to adopt it into its county highway system, and if they did that, they would have to maintain it to county specs, not just leave it sitting as an unimproved right-of-way like it is now.
But then today, let's suppose we have let's suppose this is happening today now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the county would just accept the plat the way it is?
No. The county would reject this plat because of the fact that Overland Pass is not, I mean, it attempts to be a publicly dedicated right-of-way, but there is no legal entity with responsibility for it. The county does not now allow you to plat property and just leave the roads without some legally existing entity to maintain them. So I'm telling you, this plat, the planners can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think this plat would be approved today in its present form because of the existence of this non-existent and non-dedicated to any particular agency right-of-way.
Well, the county started zoning in the 1960s, didn't it?
I'd have to
yes, I
defer
think
to...
it did in the 1960s. We're talking about late 1970s. So why wouldn't they have accepted this when they accepted the whole plat?
I'd have to defer to the county zoning people for that, Councilman.
I mean, I think they probably did accept it. Because, once again, the zoning started in the 60s, and this is the late 70s.
Scott Anderson, Planning Director for the county. That's correct, but we didn't enact subdivision regulations till the 80s. So there was no subdivision control, which really controlled the platting of this property. So there's the difference.
I don't understand what's the difference.
Okay,
I
further
really
questions? Thank you very much. Others that wish to address the joint session? Come forward and give your name, please.
I think I was here a year ago. My name is Marvin Coulter. I checked this property, checked with the township, county, South Dakota Highway Department. It seems like the city doesn't want this property either. It was dedicated for road use for development of this land. I checked with the my papers here. Titles and claims, Split Rock Heights, 3rd edition. States down here in the bottom, Leonard Schaefer dedicated some land for roads and streets. We already come to the conclusion that it's been dedicated. No public claimed the dedication. It says right here, the city don't want him to claim it. Dedication is land given by a private person to develop a residential area for streets, parks, or schools. If it's dedicated, that doesn't mean it's a road or a right-of-way. If nobody accepted that dedication, it's not complete. If it's not complete, there is no road, there is no right-of-way, there is no street. In many cases, dedication of all subdivisions was never officially accepted. It belongs to no man, no body of government body, nowhere. In my opinion, it's private land. If it never was designated as a roadway or a street, how can you vacate something that wasn't a road? I'm not a lawyer. I know some of you people in this room are. With my own investigation, it doesn't seem like it was ever designated as a road. I think it's private ground. Who it belongs to, I don't know. Well, with some investigating, I'm looking at this parcel of ground to claim it as adverse possession. I conversed with a lawyer on the subject, and the parcel of land I'm investigating, I'll describe it to you right here. The portion of South Overland Pass, beginning on 33 feet north of plotted center line intersection of Dan Ridge and South Overland Pass, laying adjacent to Lot 20, Block 5, Split Rock Heights, Second Edition, and Lot 17, mine, Block 2, Split Rock Heights, Third Edition, extended to Schaefer's Pond. So, it's private land as far as I'm concerned. That's my opinion. They want to close something. If they would investigate it, it never was open to the public. Nobody claimed, the gentleman just before me, he's a lawyer. If nobody claimed that land, it never was made into a highway or a right way. What do you want to call it? It never was a road. It never was anything except a piece of private property, partial land. So if they would have checked a little further before they signed the petition and did a little investigating on their own, they'd have found out it was private ground. There never was a road there. Investigating adverse possession, so far I meet all the requirements. So as far as talking about closing the road, if it never was accepted by a government body to look over that piece of ground, who has the right to divide it up? In my opinion, it's private ground. Anybody can answer that for me?
Your questions of Marvin then? Go ahead.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from, and I think you have a good argument.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess I would still say that the county really did take this land, contrary to what they're now saying, because all over the place we have Overland Pass. It's right here on this area that we're talking about. And when you talk about Overland Pass, you're thinking of a street or a road or whatever. But I understand where you're coming from, and if I'm wrong, then I think you have a very good argument.
I checked with the county highway department Overland Pass does not even exist on their map. Nobody even wants it.
Go ahead.
Well, the reason it's not on their map is because they haven't developed it. I mean, that's the reason it's not on there.
Wouldn't be a county road.
Yeah, so, but, you know, let me commend you on how well you've taken care of that land, because when I was out there the last few days, you did a very good job maintaining the land, the trees, and the grass. You've done an excellent job.
Thank you. One of the requirements of adverse possession, you have to maintain or improve a piece of ground, sometimes for 20 years. I maintain and improve that piece of ground for 32 years. I don't think anybody in this room would qualify for that under these circumstances. So, you make the decision, I'm going to go ahead with my plans. I'm going to keep on investigating it and see where I stand on that. So as far as closing a road, there never was a road there. There never was a right-of-way. Nobody accepted the fact to take the responsibility to take care of that road. It was a road to a slough. A road to nowhere. Like the bridge in Alaska to nowhere, this was a road to nowhere. Why would anybody want to maintain a road to nowhere? So they want to close the road so it's private. It has been private. It would save them a lot of headache if they did a little investigating on their own. It never was a right-of-way.
Questions?
I guess that's all I got.
So
Just
I do have some questions.
Yeah,
And
okay.
Mr. Coulter, you did a very nice job. So then, are you then stating because you have, in your mind's eye, adversely possessed this property for the statutory period of time, that the property belongs to you?
No, there's a process to go to. Dates back to, as far as I can tell in my investigation, to the laws when we came to this country, more or less looked like the Homestead Act. If you lived on a piece of property for a certain length of time, you grew the trees, or if you planted and built a house.
And I guess I don't need that background. I know a little bit about adverse possession issues, but the adverse possessor would be then whom? Who are you saying would be the adverse possessor of that property? That's my question as to who you are advocating for.
Myself.
And so you believe that the property then should actually come to you as the person who has maintained and cared for that property over all these years?
Yes.
Okay, that was my question. Thank you.
Further questions? Okay, thank you. Others that wish to address the joint session? Thank you, Martin.
Thank you.
I would, ask probably Gordy, to address some of those issues that were brought to the table by Mr. Coulter, because that's a whole new tactic.
Gordy, you want to come forward?
Corey, I got some questions for you. The elements for adverse possession is that it be open, notorious, hostile, exclusive, continuous for 21 years. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
Exclusive. Exclusive.
Exclusive, right.
Exclusive
I'm
has
looking
not
at-
been in there.
Excuse me. I'm looking at a photograph right here of Mr. Bills, who ran a line, currently pumping water right down the middle of this alleged adversely possessed land. Is that exclusive?
Absolutely not.
Okay, thank you. You've answered my question.
Okay, Carol, do you want to just answer some of the questions? Is that what you...
I sure will.
I guess.
First of all, the adverse possession issue is just not there. This property was dedicated to the public. It is a public right-of-way, period. A person from the county, probably from the assessor's office, signed off on this plat. That did not mean that the county accepted this right-of-way in terms of accepting responsibility, because there's a formal process set up by statutes completely independent of the platting and the zoning and the
residential subdivision statutes that deals with acceptance by counties of roadways. This right-of-way simply does not belong to the county. The fact that the county never accepted it into its system does not mean that it's not a publicly dedicated right-of-way. It is very definitely a publicly dedicated right-of-way, and anybody who were to fence it or do something else to create an obstruction could technically be prevented from doing so by virtue of the fact that it is a publicly dedicated right-of-way. It's just not a highway.
So that even though Mr. Coulter was quite eloquent in presenting his position on that, it's just not right.
That's correct.
Okay, further questions, Gordy? Others that wish to address the joint session on item number 1? Then I see no one. Do you have a question?
Yeah. Gordy, you mentioned that this was not accepted by the county.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. But we can still give it away, in effect.
Yes,
Okay.
because it meets the definition of a publicly dedicated right-of-way. It's within the extraterritorial jurisdiction of both the county and the City of Sioux Falls. And even though you have no responsibility for this road, you are the only ones who can speak for the public in terms of whether it's going to be vacated or not.
And then also at the same time, we don't have to give it away if we don't want to.
Absolutely right.
Okay. So no one coming forward, so county wants to.
I think the county's going to take action first.
Yeah.
Commissioner Kelly, you have a question?
I would move to approve the vacation.
Second.
Approve the vacation in a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes unanimously.
Now, it's really, and I think, Mark, this is probably more of a county issue for us, for them, than us. But if the city wants to take action here, we probably should follow.
We have to take action.
Say what?
I think we have to take
Yeah,
action.
that's what I said.
Yes.
Right. Right. You're right. No, I said we'll wait to see if there's a motion.
Make a motion to approve the vacation, Benega.
Bennigan moves. Is there a second?
Second, Brown.
Brown seconds. Further comments on that motion? Go ahead.
Well, I guess one of the most obvious reasons why we should not go along with this is because during the past year, what's really changed? Last year, the city said, no, we're not going to vacate. This year, the city is saying, yes, we are going to vacate. And then coupled with the fact that we have South Dakota, SDCL 31-3-6, talking about, is this going to be in the public interest, will be better served. There is no way in the world that this is going to be better served. The public will be better served by this. So once again, I would urge my colleagues on the council to remember that, once again, things have not really changed this last year, and we have to look for the public interest.
Is there, okay.
Don't we have a rule that we need all adjoining property owners to sign on the petition? Or is that just a recommendation?
I can't answer that.
It's just a city rule, I understand, but isn't that who we're representing?
Councilor Jameson, that is a city rule that is provided for land that's within a municipality. And the state's attorney can probably clarify that as well. We use Chapter 9 of the state codified law. They use Chapter 31.
So within the city limits, and this is clearly not in the city
If it's within the city limits, our first requirement is that all abutting landowners sign the petition, and then there's a number of other steps that are carried out to perform a vacation.
Okay, we've got a motion been made and seconded to approve item number 1. Further discussion? Seeing none. All in favor of the motion to approve, vote yes. Those opposed, no.
Counselor Staggers?
No.
Anderson?
No.
Benega?
Yes.
Brown?
Yes.
Costello?
Yes.
Jameson?
Yes.
Knudsen?
Yes.
Litz?
Yes.
All members present voted 6 yes, 2 no. Approved. Is there further business? Is there a motion on the city side?
I so move to adjourn. Knudsen?
Knudsen, is there a second? Bennigan, seconds.
Second.
Bennigan, all in favor of the motion to adjourn, vote yes. Those opposed, no.
Counselor Staggers?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Benega?
Yes.
Brown?
Yes.
Costello?
Yes.
Jameson?
Yes.
Knutson?
Yes.
Litz?
Yes.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Is there a second? There is. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously.